I'm sure I'll get bombarded now by all the geeks who run the Friday the 13th websites. I say that with the utmost affection and respect. I love you guys, but I'm sure I screwed up there somewhere. Okay, time for part 6.
Straight from my boiler room to your home, it's Freddy Krueger on your phone.
You're angry. And I don't mean to laugh, excuse me, it's just the way I am.
If it goes out, it means the death of millions of people, everyone watching. Don't you understand that?
Hey, alright.
Get the hell out of here! Now! You son of a bitch.
The thorn symbol is actually a constellation of stars that appears from time to time on Halloween night. Whenever it appears, he appears.
Jason's better than this thorn crap.
What are you doing? What?
Maybe not too much better. Okay, it's not too bad. Alright. Let's do this. First up, the easy stuff. Release year, budget, runtime, and some other stats. With the original Halloween being released in 1978, and the original Friday the 13th 2 years later in 1980. Now you can see, Paramount kind of pumped out a Jason almost every year in the 1980s, while Halloween and Michael were kind of absent in the middle. The two franchises did, however, battle it out in 81, 82, 88, and 89. And just like the classic 80s, they did it again in 2009 with the Friday the 13th reboot and Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. According to the Internet Movie Database, the average runtime for a 1980s horror film is around 90 minutes, and Halloween and Friday the 13th fit right in with that. Jason Takes Manhattan is the longest running Friday the 13th, coming in at 100 minutes, while Rob Zombie's remake of Halloween comes in at 109 minutes. But most of the older classic films all hit pretty close to the 90-minute mark. When it comes to budget, nothing can compare to the original Halloween's $300,000 budget. It was so small, and its box office return was so big. Now, the original Friday the 13th had a little bigger budget than Halloween, but still small by today's standards. Now, obviously, the newer films have way larger budgets. Freddy vs. Jason had the largest budget of all by $30 million, and both remakes come in right around $19 and $20 million. The Halloween series seems to have had bigger budgets, but let's check out the box office return. Nothing can compare to Freddy vs. Jason's $114 million box office. But with that set aside, nothing can compare to Halloween's $70 million box office, the largest of any of the original films. Now, obviously the number kind of goes up with the newer films. The Halloween remake made $80.2 million. The Friday the 13th remake made $91.4 million. The Friday the 13th franchise has grossed an estimated $464 million box office worldwide, while Halloween has an estimated $336 million worldwide. So Friday the 13th has made a little bit more money, but it also has 2 more films and was really active during the 80s slasher craze, and Halloween was kind of absent. But just because a film made a lot of money doesn't make it great. I mean, check out Blair Witch Project, And actually, Halloween was the most successful independent film up until Blair Witch's release. But who cares about how much money it made? I mean, what makes these movies? The killers. So let's see how these guys match up physically. We put a ton of research into this one. How do these 2 killers match up physically? A lot of websites have their heights listed at about 6'2" and 6'5", but that wasn't good enough. So we took the heights of all the main actors and stuntmen who have played Jason and Michael over the years. We excluded the young kid versions of each, and of course, Mrs. Voorhees and Roy from A New Beginning. With Ken Kinzinger and Derek Mears both coming in at 6'5" for Jason, and the tallest Michael being Taylor Maine at a crazy 6'8". The average height of each character now is about 6 foot for Michael, and we're going to say 6'4", 6'5" for Jason. Now we had a hell of a time finding out their weights, but given the height, body type, and some other information listed, we can say that their average weights are about 200 pounds for Michael and around 250 for Jason. So obviously, Jason is a little bit bigger, and checking out some of these screenshots from the films can help back that theory up. When it comes to wardrobe and appearance, Michael's look stays pretty consistent throughout the series. A blank white mask and a dark blue, almost black, mechanic-style jumpsuit. He did, however, rock a gray jumpsuit in Part 6, and the mask was aged and even ripped in the 2 Rob Zombie films. Jason, on the other hand, completely changes almost every film, from a sack mask and flannels in Part 2 to the iconic hockey mask and green shirt in Part 3. In Part 4, he got fingernails. Roy in 5 is pretty much Michael with a different mask. In 6, Jason becomes a zombie, and in 7, you can actually see his bones. His wardrobe has changed, and he has decayed more and more over the years, but the concept has pretty much stayed the same: hockey mask and rotting flesh. They did, however, go back to a more human Jason in the 2009 film, but they did follow the trend of Jason in a jacket. So Friday the 13th and Jason kinda win that one, being a little bigger and badder. But, I mean, Jason did have Kane Hodder, and Ken Kinzinger was a giant in Freddy vs. Jason. However, Taylor Maine was a fucking beast in the Rob Zombie remake. But these killers really wouldn't be anything without their amazing supporting cast and final girls. The Halloween series kind of stuck with the same final girls throughout: Laurie Strode and her daughter, Jamie Lloyd. Laurie Strode, of course, played by Jamie Lee Curtis in parts 1, 2, H2O, and Resurrection, and then by Taylor Scott Compton in the remakes. Danielle Harris played Jamie Lloyd, and crazy enough, she was actually in both Halloween remakes. Halloween 3, 6, and 8 are the only films with a different final girl. Halloween still had an amazing cast aside from the surviving girls: Dr. Loomis, played by the legendary Donald Pleasance, and then Malcolm McDowell in the remakes. Ellie Cornell as Rachel in 4 and 5, Paul Rudd in 6, Tom Atkins in 3, and even rappers LL Cool J and Busta Rhymes made appearances. Over at Camp Crystal Lake, Jason took a completely different route, having a different final girl in each film, starting with Adrienne King in the original Friday the 13th, and continuing with Amy Steele in Part 2, Dana Kimball in Part 3, and lots of others. Now, some of Jason's more famous kills include Crispin Glover, Stephen Williams, and even Kevin Bacon in the original Friday the 13th was killed by Mrs. Voorhees, who was played by none other than Betsy Palmer. Friday the 13th series is also famous for having Kane Hodder playing Jason 4 times. Friday the 13th didn't have Laurie Strode like Halloween did, but it did have Tommy Jarvis in 3 films, played by Corey Feldman in the final chapter, and Tom Matthews from Return of the Living Dead playing him in Jason Lives. Laurie Strode versus Tommy Jarvis. Comparing the two is difficult, Tommy being in 3 films while Laurie was in 4, not including the remake and its sequel. Now Tommy stood up to Jason and actually killed him as a boy, beat tons of ass in part 5, and had the brains to defeat him again in part 6. Laurie, however, very strong and smart, had the ability to fight back when unexpected, and she even evolved several times as a character throughout the series, and actually killed Michael herself, sort of, in H2O. But in return, she got killed in Resurrection. So who's the better character? Between Tommy and Laurie, it's completely up to you as the viewer. Laurie with an axe? Tommy with a machete? A decapitated head? Or a sliced in half one? Crazy nut house patient? Or crazy nut house patient? Lures Michael into a trap? Lures Jason into a trap? It's kind of a hard decision and completely up to you. Now, of course, the final girls, the cast, they're important, but it's the crew behind the camera that's just as important. Halloween was written and directed by John Carpenter with help from Deborah Hill, while Friday the 13th was written by Victor Miller and directed by Sean Cunningham. As many differences as these two series have, they actually do have some similarities. The first being director Steve Miner, who directed Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3, and then in 1998 directed Halloween H2O. Dick Warlock, who played the Shape in Halloween 2, also doubled for Roy, in Friday the 13th Part 5. John Carl Butchler, who directed Part 7 of Friday the 13th, also did the makeup effects on Halloween 6. Speaking of makeup effects, Friday the 13th is famous for having Tom Savini work on Parts 1 and 4, while K&B Effects worked on both Jason Goes to Hell and The Mask on Halloween H2O. Halloween can also be noted for having famed rock star Rob Zombie behind the camera, directing the remake and its sequel. I'm gonna say Halloween probably has a little bit better cast and crew. I mean, Donald Pleasance, Jamie Lee Curtis, John Carpenter, awesome cast and crew. You could say Rob Zombie, I guess. Friday the 13th, though, we didn't do too bad. I mean, legendary effects artist Tom Savini 2 times, Kane Hodder, Corey Feldman, Crispin Glover, Kevin fucking Bacon. I mean, we didn't do too bad. But now, money, cast, crew, killers, there wouldn't be nothing in a horror film without the kills, right? So let's see how these things compare. When it comes to kills, Friday the 13th comes in first with an estimated 179 kills, and Halloween with 157. But if you exclude Part 1 and 5, where Jason isn't the killer, and Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, it drops their totals down to 148 and 135. Estimated, of course. But is it the number of kills, or the creativity of them? In 1981, in Friday the 13th Part 2 and Halloween 2, Jason and Michael both kill with a hammer, both to a cop or security guard, in the head. This was always one of my favorite comparisons. Now, Michael never really used a machete, but this huge fucking knife in Halloween 6 is pretty similar to Jason's machete when they both go on a rampage, kinda seen here. They both also use their hands a lot of times in creative ways to crush heads and break necks. One of the more popular weapons of Friday the 13th is the pitchfork, and in Halloween 5, Michael actually uses one too. And, of course, electrocution has always been one of their favorites. Now, one thing pretty different about these two franchises are their settings. From Friday the 13th's quiet, haunted little summer camp, or Halloween's spooky suburbs of Illinois. Let's take a closer look at these two franchises' locations. Halloween mainly takes place in the suburbs of Illinois in a town called Haddonfield. It's usually in houses or in the streets trick-or-treating, with a few stops at Smith's Grove, the Myers House, a college in Halloween H2O, and of course a hospital in Halloween 2. Now, the creators of Halloween said that they wanted to make it feel like any other little small town, somewhere that me or you could actually live and where bad things usually don't happen. Friday the 13th mostly takes place at Camp Crystal Lake or the nearby woods, and throughout the series we get to see a few different locations: Packanack Lounge, Higgins Haven, and the Jarvis House, but they're all still mainly in the woods. We also get to take a trip to New York City and outer space. Jason's been all over. Some of the locations that both series share is hospitals, police stations, graveyards, barns, and both characters have a house. The Voorhees house only appeared in Jason Goes to Hell, and the Myers house appeared pretty frequently throughout the Halloween series. Now, one thing I've always loved about horror movies, and especially Friday the 13th and Halloween, was the cover art. Let's take a closer look at it. When it comes to each series' expanded universe, both have numerous numbers of comics and novels. Now, Jason actually fights Freddy and Ash from the Evil Dead series and Leatherface in his comic books. Michael just kind of hangs around Haddonfield with lots of backstories and origins. As far as video games go, Halloween was the first franchise to expand to the digital world, being released on the Atari 2600. Now, we're all pretty familiar with the Friday the 13th Nintendo game, but Friday the 13th also had a game released on the Commodore 64. And we all know about the upcoming Friday the 13th game here in 2007. So, 3 Jason games, 1 Michael Myers game. Both of these franchises had some awesome comic books and even novels, a whole expanded universe outside of the films. Check this out. Each series is pretty unique in its own way, as well as its cover art. Friday the 13th kinda kept the same concept with parts 1 through 3, and then focused on the hockey mask for the sequels. And that's about it. The Halloween films again focus on the mask for majority of the covers, with 4 and 5 always confusing the shit out of me. They look the same. H2O and Resurrection kind of being the signs of the times and resembling the Scream I Know What You Did Last Summer covers, and the original Halloween poster is probably the best, as well as Friday the 13th. You can't beat the originals. Alright guys, and that's Killer Comparisons. Friday the 13th, Halloween, Jason Voorhees, and Michael Myers. We hope you guys enjoyed the video. We tried to cover some of the things that maybe other people skip over when thinking about these two franchises. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time on Killer Comparisons. Thanks for watching, guys.